He adored New York City. He idolized it all out of proportion. No, make that, he romanticized it all out of proportion. Better. To him, no matter what the season was, this was still a town that existed in black and white and pulsated to the great tunes of George Gershwin.
I have a particularly romantic view of New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, and it was only a 5-cent subway ride to Manhattan. It was very exciting on Fifth Avenue and lights. This was all a magical land. My father did everything, but he was a cab driver and a waiter and had a lot of menial jobs. My mother was a bookkeeper. But now, my father and mother could never be able to afford to survive in New York. I'm interested in depicting the romantic aspects of New York, but New York has got many, many problems, and one of the obvious problems, if you walk out on the street, is poverty and homelessness for people, the lack of affordable housing for them.
Conditions for homeless New Yorkers in the 1980s were abhorrent. People were living in hotels that weren't clean, with mice and roaches and no heat and mold all over the walls. And the city was in effect locking away the most needy, vulnerable New Yorkers into conditions with no supports in housing that was unsuitable for anyone to live in. The creation and the start of the Times Square Hotel was in effect a revolution that changed homeless policy across the country.
We started with the Times Square and turned it into what is still the single largest supportive housing residence in the United States.
Currently, Common Ground operates over 3,000 units of supportive housing across New York City, with over 1,000 units in the pipeline.
We've built more than a dozen beautiful buildings, both preservation and ground-up new construction.
An innovation we introduced is the twin-engine approach. We have a very clear focus on perfecting property management and property development in supportive housing, and we have an equal focus on doing that with supportive services, mental health, medical services, social services, and we've combined that into one for the benefit of the individual that moves into our housing.
We don't only house people, but we help them restore their lives.
Good morning, sweetie. How are you today?
Right. All right.
Drop off the rent check. I'm a native New Yorker, born in Brooklyn. I worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art for 27 years. I was a rigger, setting up paintings, art displays. I lost my job in 2003. After that, I became homeless. And I was living on a park bench. I'd wake up and look over and I'd see my old apartment. And I often wondered, what did I ever do to deserve to become homeless? That becomes your life. You're trying to survive and hope that the right people or right organization will come along and get you back on your feet.
Andy came to the soup kitchen, and like most homeless people, he'd seen better days.
I'll tell it to anybody. It's my little guardian angel right there. I love her to death. I mean, I can't ever say enough about her or Common Ground for what they've done for me.
When a resident moves in, I get to hear just how they've been lost almost, and they feel like they have found their home now.
We have helped more than 12,000 people escape homelessness permanently.
We focus on chronically street homeless individuals, and that means folks that are on the street 9 months or more out of the last 2 years, and help get them indoors.
You really need engaged citizens who have a humanitarian bent to try and help these people who are, sleeping on gratings in the freezing weather or sleeping down in the subways, or, it's a terrible, terrible thing for them, and it's a terrible thing for the city.
Over the last 10 years, on our watch, on all of our watches, the homelessness population has grown substantially. And as of tonight, there are almost 60,000 New Yorkers living in shelter, 25,000 kids.
When I was 9 years old, after a fire, my family and I were a stone's throw away from being homeless. And but for a community of neighbors that rallied around us, we would have become a statistic and been in the homeless shelter system. Our organization is that community that others need. We watch people go from living under bridges to living in an apartment and going to work every day. People's lives changed right before us.
Love for a city like New York, that's got so many problems, is irrational. And it reminds me of one of my old jokes. A guy goes into a psychiatrist and says, Doc, you got to help me. My brother thinks he's a chicken. And the doctor says, well, just tell him he isn't. And the guy says, well, I'd like to, but I need the eggs. So that's how I feel about New York. You know, there's a million reasons why it's crazy to love it, but, you know, in the end, you can't get out of your system. You need the eggs.